Hello people, can you hear me okay? Let me know if the answer is yes or no. Hopefully that's coming through okay. Hopefully. 1, 2, 2, 1. Yeah, just leave a comment. Any questions about anything are fine. Hopefully you're doing well. John Ong says loud and clear. Awesome. Cheers, John. Questions about anything are fine. I just wanted to jump on and check out how everyone's doing. And I've got a few minutes, so you can chat about whatever. I'm just playing through the HX Stomp at the moment. My favorite triad shape. Helix versus FM9. Two interesting questions. Cortex 3 Live had much wire effect. Fair point. Audio is good, Kevin says. My favorite triad shape, I think generally will be spread triads. So if you probably are familiar with these, but these things. Hey Clive, how you doing? Hope you've had a good few days. So those are my favorite triad shapes. I've done some videos on the channel about them. If you search for let me just find spread triads. If I search on the channel, this is probably spread triads. If you're interested in spread triads, then that would be the video that I'd recommend. Jamie, sorry. So, right, questions. Helix versus FM9. I'm torn because I play through a Helix, so how do you feel about Helix versus FM9? So the answer for me is I still use the HX Stomp and Helix way more than any of the fractal stuff. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One of them is that's what people generally would come to this channel for anyway. So anytime I do fractal videos, they're not necessarily the things that people come to my channel for anyway. The other thing is that I don't actually find that the Helix or HX Stomp is at all lacking for me. If I did, I'd be happy to move on, if that makes sense. So the question for you might be, well, your name is ... but the question is, do you find yourself thinking, I don't really like this tone, or this is not inspiring? If you're finding that with your Helix or your HX Stomp or whatever model you're using, then maybe I'd be starting to look elsewhere. However, if that's not the case for you, then actually moving to another modeler is quite a lot of work. So, in terms of real world applications, they're not massively different. Realistically, things on each of them sound roughly similar, and you can make loads of sounds with both of them. So unless you're finding, whenever I pick up my Helix, I'm feeling totally uninspired, then I wouldn't necessarily say you need to go out and buy anything different. Hey Beeps, our local COVID expert, David Beebe. Yeah, but that's kind of my thoughts on that. If those people that have made the switch from Helix for whatever reason to fractal, I think in most cases are fairly happy, and you can read stories from those folks if you want to. Equally, have I tried any of the budget modelers? I've tried, what have I tried? I've tried the New X stuff. That's kind of budget stuff. I really like some of that. I've not tried any of the Moore stuff. I think I've had the odd Joyo pedal, but none of their modeler things. Gorav asks, is the amp model more powerful, I presume, on the Fractal than the Helix? I think in some technical aspects, the answer to that is yes. I think in terms of oversampling, they're more powerful. As in, I think they fix their oversampling at a higher rate than Line 6 do. I can't confirm that, but I think that's the case. And I think in terms of editable options, it's a little bit more, well, a lot more that you could do in the Fractal world if you're into tweaking and stuff. So you can go and you can change all sorts of things, like you could change what tubes are in a model. You can change, cathode resistance, all this sort of stuff. If you know what any of that means, and if you want to get into that sort of stuff. So in terms of power, I think that would argue, it's probably not even an argument, is it? The answer to that would be yes. In the same way, like the Helix amp models are more powerful than the Quad Cortex amp models because you can tweak more, if you get what I mean. Dynamic response, I think that would vary from model to model, and also varies hugely depending on the settings. So I don't know about that. Jason asked, do I know a trick to make all your presets the same volume? The answer to that is absolutely not. I think even matching things in volume at all is a bit of a tricky thing, because a distorted preset that is more compressed can in some ways be louder, or on average be quieter than a clean preset. It's all a bit of a tricky thing. You kind of just have to use your ears and try and do it at the volume that you can actually be playing the thing. It's a very tricky thing for sure. So sorry I don't have a better answer to that, Jason. Hey Light, hope you're doing well. Thomas Moore asks, any major advantages of going to an HX Stomp XL from a Podgo? There are a few. So you have access to a few more models, like the Cosmos Echo, which is the space echo, the Roland module, like mod delay. This is a tape delay, isn't it? Yeah, that thing. You'd also have access to the full King of Tone if you were looking for that, and some of the more like poly sustain, I think, didn't go to the pod. There's a few models, and also then you'd have parallel routing if you were looking for that. In terms of foot switching stuff, the Podgo and the whatchamacallit is kind of a little bit like it. So Will Marshall here asks, I'm a 53-year-old newbie wanting my first electric. I have electric taste. Do I really need to worry about whether I get single coils or humbuckers? I like cleans as much as distortion. Thanks. So Will, my first question would be, who's your favourite guitarist? If you were just using it for effects, Siago, I would personally use I'd personally go for an HX Stomp rather than the Podgo if you're just using for effects, because the Podgo has a few like fixed signal chain kind of limitations, and personally I feel like the HX Stomp is a little bit more suited to that task, and has the MIDI capabilities which the Podgo doesn't. Rolando asks for tips to direct a PA. I'm not really an expert on that. I'd say my main advice would be to try and do that. Like try and actually get in front of a PA at volume, and maybe try it in context and get an idea for whether that stuff actually works. So Will Marshall is into Pink Floyd, so I mean that's single coils, right, mostly. Thin Lizzy, humbuckers, Meridian, shout out. I sort of text Mark occasionally from Meridian. AC/DC, humbuckers, right? So in the main there, it sounds sort of like rock stuff. So humbuckers might not be a bad shout. Do you think that Line 6 Helix would fix the oversampling in future? They have done. They've improved their oversampling. So I think probably they're fine in that aspect. It's just that Fractal kind of go over and above to make sure that aliasing is not an issue. Thomas asks, why not just the HX effects for effects only? That's a good question. The answer for me is possibly I find the HX effects is a little bit more difficult to use for me because it doesn't have the proper screen. Does the stomp work in front of an amp well? I think so, yes. And I've tested to see it in the loop and stuff. So if you were using it for just effects, I think still, personally, I feel like the stomp does a few different bits and pieces, so it's kind of cool. Atta Pasvant says, hello John, when playing legato, do you always pick the first note on each string? If not, what's your advice on that? I'd say to start with, yes. But when you're practicing this stuff, you possibly want to be want to kind of get away from the idea that you have to pick. So you want to practice kind of being able to pick stuff without necessarily, jump strings without necessarily having to pick. And you practice this with kind of like hammer-on only playing. Or yeah, Will, you can definitely get great clean tones out of humbuckers as well. So for my jazz stuff, I use humbuckers. It's just you generally need a bit less gain than single coil, so you should be fine with humbuckers. Thomas Moore says he's found his... Hi Thomas, by the way. Podgo works good in the FX loop, but not so good in front of the amp. Have you found that? I've not really tried the Podgo too much in front of the amp or behind, because the way that it was set up didn't, to me, scream that was the way that I wanted to use it, because the amp out was what I was hoping that they could make some adjustments to, but I haven't seen them actually do that yet. Kaz Emir says, hello, since I'm using more high gain metal gain presets, it just makes a lot of noise. I always use my Boss NS2, so my sound was very clean. Is there a way to use it with a stomp? Have you tried using the noise gate on the input yet? Because that's pretty good, I think. If not, there's also a built-in model of the Horizon Devices gate, which is pretty good as well. You could try that. You could also just put your Boss NS2 somewhere in front of the stomp if you want. What do I suggest between the Line 6 M13 and the Podgo? So the Podgo should be able to do everything the M13 could. Obviously the layout and stuff is a bit different, but all of the legacy effects are, or most of them will be in the Podgo. So in theory, the Podgo can do all of that stuff. The M13 hasn't been supported for a few years, right? Oh, cheers, Jackin. I'll sort that for you in a second. Once I finish the stream, I'll just email you. Joshua asks, hey John, I'm considering buying a Fender American Pro 2 Strat, and I'm wondering if the K-line guitars you play offer any notable differences from the Fenders. One key thing is that the neck angle is slightly different, because most Fender guitars in the past, or a lot of them, would require a shim, apparently, and Chris decided that by just changing that neck pocket angle, you don't need a shim most of the time. The other thing is that this is built by one person, whereas a American Pro 2, I'm presuming, is made in the massive Fender factory, and probably a lot of them are really, really good. I don't know what their quality control's like. Also, they're possibly a little bit cheaper than the K-line, but I don't know. I've had the American Professional, the first one, and that was a 2-point trem as well, right? So this has got a 6-point vintage style trem. Will Marshall said, I already bought the Spark amp. Would it matter what guitar you had for the sound the Spark amp can push out? No, you'll be fine with humbuckers or all singles with that. Just got my Stomp today. Want a pedalboard fuzzes. I found the Helix can't do that well. You don't like the Helix fuzzes? I think the Helix fuzzes are probably as good as any other model of fuzzes. HX Stomp or Moore G300. I've never played a Moore GE300, so I can't really answer that. When is the patch Clean Your Life in the HX Stomp? I'll need to sort that. Right, this is deluxe reverb. Let's take those mids back down. Mark asks, do I ever play with a Bixby? The answer to that is nope. Any thoughts on roller bridges? I've never tried one, so I'm a complete novice on any of that stuff, so I can't answer, I'm afraid. So Jackin asks my favorite headphones. So these are Sennheiser HD58X, and I think they're like they come from a company called Massdrop, which you can see in there, and I think they're like a little bit of a copy of, not a copy, but they're made by Sennheiser, but they're like a version of some more expensive Sennheiser headphones. So yeah, that's the ones that I recommend. Sennheiser Massdrop HD58X. But aside from that, I really recommend with the modeling stuff that you try a pair of open back headphones. I find that I don't know whether it's the Sennheiser that's the main thing, or that it's like that they are open back. I think the open back is the aspect which I like so much about these. But try and find a pair of open back headphones, because I think with the modeling stuff, they are kind of a bit more, well, they're less fatiguing for me. It feels less enclosed, and maybe like the sound is moving around a bit more freely. That's kind of my opinion on it. I can't really back it up with anything, but I think my friend Jake also thought something similar when he tried his. If you can record the Helix in stereo through the USB if you want to do it, or I use personally 2 XLRs. Well, I use the 2 jacks into 2 XLRs. Bayer Dynamic DT100s, I've got those as well. I think 100s or DT80s, I can't remember. But the open back thing is the thing I like. I don't know if the Bayer Dynamic probably do some open back headphones too, but you could check them out. You know, I wouldn't say you definitely need them to be open back, but I say if you were buying new headphones anyway, or thinking about buying new headphones, try some open back ones, I think, because I think there's something slightly different going on. And technology wise, I think the open back stuff is a little bit more advanced as well. I think I looked up a little bit and did some reading on it just to check whether it was true or not. And I think closed back headphones do use slightly different driver technology. That could be wrong, but I think that's the case. So the ones that I'm using right now, Thomas, are Mastrop Sennheiser 58X or HD 58X. And you can find them on eBay. It's basically an American thing. I think it's a way that they buy like things in bulk from certain companies and offer them to on a semi sort of subscription type basis. But you can find them on eBay. And I like these headphones. So, you know, if you're looking for them, I resent doing this. Bear Dynamic DT990 open back. Yep. So yeah, either something by Bear Dynamic are kind of cool. Can we get stereo image like the Archetype John Petrucci Neural DSP on the Helix? Yes. All it's really doing, I can show you this right now, is what we'll do is put in, if I can, a dual delay, and you put it kind of before your delay and reverb. I think Liana bought me this hoodie from one of her like friends. Yeah, go check that video out, Tony. It's for you. From one of her friends. I think it's called Twiggy Tags, but it's like super warm. So it's been kind of useful to have. But yeah, it's quite funny. But it is actually really warm, as well as looking ghastly. But it's kind of funny to play around in it. So here's what I'm doing. I'm setting a dual delay with the mix left and right. I think this is roughly what that block is doing. So with that off, and then if it's, so this is something you want to be really careful with though, because if you're listening to this sort of thing on a phone, it's going to sound really rubbish. And if I push that delay time even further up, we put it up to like 70, you'll hear really clearly, hopefully, what's going on. Basically, the delayed signal makes it feel like you're in a bigger space, or there's left and right. The other thing that you could do in the Helix is you've got the retro reel. Not the retro reel, you've got the double take. So if I can clear up, I'll find another preset. So for instance here, maybe not. I need to find a double take on a preset. Just get rid of some of this. Now, so right on here we've got, if I go to clear that, clear that. So I've got my preset here. So double take is, sounds like it's outputting in mono. It shouldn't be. The double take is in the modulation in stereo. This is like a TC mimic. And if you chuck this after your cab, it does a similar. Yeah, it's called Twiggy Tags if you're looking for it in the UK. So yeah, I'd use either double take. If you turn up the slop, you get like a bigger. Although I don't love the sound of the double take. So you could use something like that. But yeah, those are the kind of things that I would use. Either a ping pong delay or stereo delay. But it's not an effect that I think you want to use all the time, especially if you're expecting people to listen to what you're doing on a phone, because it can kind of get a bit funky. I'm going to just turn my phone to silent because that's going nuts. Right. What master level do you use on stage? I generally run the Helix and the HX Stomp at about halfway on the knob thing so that I can go louder or quieter if I need to. I think line 6 recommends sort of running that up full. It's up to you. So I think both Fractal and Helix or HX Stomp in terms of patch transitions are a little bit, I think they're more expecting people to be staying within the same preset and using snapshots. That's, I think, what they expect people to be doing more so. On the Helix, you can have things set to, if you have just one of the processors, you can set to have trails across preset changes, in which case you get instant and whatever the word would be, actual seamless preset changes. Does using chorus block help giving the stereo image too for playing high gain rhythm live? Well, there is another thing you could do for that, Gaurav. So what you could try using is, let me just find this a second, the 70s chorus. If you have your device to hand, if you go into modulation, 70s chorus and stereo, if you run that in the stereo mode classic, it chucks things left and right like this. And if you just turn like the chorus rate down, so without that, again, that's the sort of thing that I think actually that would probably work fine if that was summed to mono. There are videos on the channel, Kevin, of me messing around with the quad Cortex. It's definitely not a Helix killer, and I would say it has definitely been overhyped. I know that opinion might not be shared by everyone. It's unique in that it's probably the only modeler in what, maybe 10 years that doesn't have a looper. So yeah, there's still like a long road ahead for the quad Cortex. I think it does enough that you could be super happy with it. But if they're expecting to sort of blow everything out of the water, there's a lot of things that it's not really doing at the moment. And, you know, a Kemper or a Axe Effects or a Helix can make sounds that a quad Cortex cannot. The opposite is not true. Does that make sense? So, Anton, I use a Boss EV30. Let me try and, because I've just been asked to do something. So Mark, I'll just get a stereo cable thing. That's what I use, a Boss EV30. So I'll just try and pull up a couple of expression type presets. Are we back in business, or is that? Yeah. Right, so in terms of what I like to do with an expression pedal, my kind of number one use really is to do this kind of thing. Where I'm using the expression pedal to kind of freeze. You know, that sort of thing where I'm... So I find that to be like a really fun kind of practice tool. So I'm using, sorry Mr. A, that I was asked by Mark Marcello just above you, who's asking what I use my expression pedal for with the HX Stomp. So basically this is my main use, is kind of using it to add like infinite freeze. Which you could do with a momentary switch, but I prefer to use an expression pedal. And you know, you could pick something like that. That's kind of cool, I think. Hey Rob, hope you're well. We're hearing the HX Stomp right now. Yeah, this is the HX Stomp, so the little brother of the Helix. Alan asks, which 1 amp model would I recommend in the HX Stomp for general purpose gigging stuff, particularly when using a Power Cab Plus? It depends on the gig. So Alan, what sort of gigs are you doing? The amp model that I'm using right now, incidentally, is the Interstate Z, which might be one of them. This is direct, Rob. So for, hey Nosso, hope you're well. Drop C, that's cool. Thank you very much. Hope you're well. There's a C for you. Well, it's not frozen. Anton asks, why do I prefer the HX Stomp over the XL? I just don't have an XL. That's the only reason I don't use one, Anton. I've got a few HX Stomps, and I didn't necessarily feel like I needed the extra buttons on an HX Stomp XL because I'm not really gigging loads at the moment anyway. Hope you're well, Alec. You're in Italy still. So, Alan, funky modern pop. I might try maybe the Lone Star. Stephen. It's right, isn't it? Is it Stephen? I can't remember. Yeah, I think the Cali Texas Channel 1 I might consider because that's super high headroom and has a lot of bottom end, so it can do like that bubbly, funky thing. That might be one thing that I'd look at, Alan, maybe to start with. This preset is in my Expression bundle. Yeah, this is Freeze 3.0 Ice Z. I use the Helix Live more than the Stomp Mr. A. I use the Power Cab as well, and then the XLRs go to front of house. Generally, that's generally how I do things. The XLR out of the Helix, and then the digital output goes to the Power Cab, ideally. Hey Rob, so basically the presets, yeah, are all of the presets are there. Basically, all of my presets together cost like £5 for every single one of them. So that's kind of, I try not to rip people off in that way. So hopefully you get one or two sounds out of those that you dig. Then the other thing that I do, if you check around the channel, there are quite a lot of videos of kind of building the presets, so that might give you a tip or two anyway, so you don't have to buy the presets, because hopefully you can see me building a few different bits and pieces that might help you get on your way potentially, and you know, going through a few bits and pieces. Do I worry about potential phantom power hitting the Helix? I just tell the people not to send phantom power through that, or I'm doing the sound so I don't have to worry about it anyway. But yeah, it's just a part of the conversation that I'd have with that sound person. Yeah, Alan, the Jazz Rivet will presumably be very clean, but it also might be a little bit sterile in some ways, because I guess that's a solid state amp. I would try maybe the Cali Texas Channel 1 or the Litigator. Do I use the same patch with the same IRs to the Power Cab and front of house? I use the power cab in LF raw mode only, so I don't have any IRs going through that, if that makes sense. So that's just running basically as a speaker, or as close to as a speaker as I can get the thing. So LF raw, so no IRs go to the power cab, the IRs go to front of house, and that's that same own hammer one that I use for a lot of stuff. What stopped? Is this? What stoplight? That sounds like a good solution, A Lobster, or A Lobsters Johnson. Yeah, I don't use analog pedals for the Helix Live just because I don't feel the need to particularly. Which own hammer one is it? It's in the folder. It's one that they used to give away for free, the Meza Boogie God's Cab thing, I think it was called, or something like that. Just found one in there that sounds relatively neutral. Favorite distortion of the Stomp? Maybe the Timmy is what I'm using right now. Or the Scream 808. Or the Top Secret OD I use quite a lot as well. So Jack in R asked, but that means you get a different sound through your monitors than your power cab? No. And the answer to that is always yes anyway, because once you stick a mic in front of an amp, you get a different sound coming back through anyway, right? So yes, but it's not something I'm worried about. And if anything, I kind of like the idea of having kind of different bits of tone coming through, because then it makes like a different thing. Have you tried that live? Yeah. It might have been one of my videos that you saw. Let me just find Living on a Prayer. Here's a video that I did recently. Using the pad generator. Can definitely work. Yeah, to fix that, Gorav, you need to put your volume pedal after your amp and cab rather than before, I would suggest. What are you using in your presets, A Lobsters Johnson? Pasha Baisha, I can't say your name, I'm very sorry, that's clearly abysmal. How am I able to post daily? I kind of like to play guitar daily, and this is what I do for a job at the moment. So I used to make most of my money from kind of gigging, but at the moment that's not particularly easy, and so taking the online stuff seriously is what I've been doing. So that's why I post daily, because I figure, you know, I might as well treat it like a job and like I'm trying to do it seriously. So I've been doing that for a couple of years now. Hey Albert, Jason asks, what gauge strings do you like? I up to 11s from 10s and I'm not sure I like it. I use 10s and find that they're pretty much fine. I did use 11s in the past, but at the time I was also playing keyboard quite a bit, and I didn't necessarily find, I felt from playing keyboard my left hand was a bit uncomfortable sometimes, so I went to 10s, and also the company whose strings I was using were Pitbull strings and they didn't do 11s, so I moved down to 10s, and I kind of like 10s just as much. You get used to it, so don't feel like you have to play heavy strings to sound a certain way. Alan Holdsworth used 8s and he's a better guitarist than any of us, so just use what works for you, I think. Dual Deluxes or Dual 5150s, there is in the templates, if you check out, I think it was Two Tones, might be the name of the templates in the Helix, where you can see some efficient ways to run dual amp setups with the Helix. You might be able to squeeze some more out of your presets if you try that sort of routing, a lobster, but you probably already know that. Right. Mohammed likes my voice. He's calling me ma'am, which is fair. Jackin asks, do I recommend lessons to play like you? Not really. I didn't have lessons, so just play guitar lots. The thing is, I don't feel like Josh Smith has better tone than Alan Holdsworth. So, personally, I wouldn't necessarily think that strings are necessarily the most important part of Josh Smith's tone. He does play guitar quite heavily as well, and it's definitely, in the blues world, I think heavier strings are definitely a thing. After Stevie Ray Vaughan, I think, started that kind of idea, and Josh Smith for sure was a massive Stevie Ray Vaughan fan. I think that was part of the reason that he moved away from the Strat to a Telecaster, was because he didn't want to be too influenced in that way. So yeah, if you're trying to do the Josh Smith thing, then if heavy strings are part of that, then fine. But if you're doing your own thing, then absolutely experiment with different string types. I think Rhett and Rick did a video, didn't they, talk about using lighter strings. I don't know that you sacrifice tone. I think it's slightly different maybe, but it's not worse or better necessarily. If you play really heavy, heavier strings can kind of give you a bit more resistance, so strings aren't flapping about and sounding, or crapping out and stuff. So that's kind of cool. Studio speakers, I've got JBL LSR 305s, quite cheap speakers, but they do the job. Online lessons you could recommend for starting legato. I do some on the channel. There's a playlist called Lessons and Licks if you're interested in that. I'd also expect that Tom Quayle's lessons on legato are probably some of the best on the internet. I think David Beebe may also have some legato packages. So if I was going down either of those routes, I think I'd look at David Beebe or Tom Quayle, as I think those two guys are actually pretty switched on in the legato world and not just trying to sell stuff. Yeah, 11s are counterproductive, I think, to legato, Jason says. I don't think they necessarily are, but there's also no reason to press on through it if you have to. Is that true? The Meshuggah used lights. I guess Frederick Thorndon might have, because he's an Alan Holdsworth huge fan of Alan. Yeah, the Mulecaster is sort of a different type of guitar thing, though, isn't it? Right? They're quite tuned down as well, aren't they? Generally, aren't they generally sort of in like an open C or something? So yeah, Jason, if you're trying to learn legato stuff like what I'm playing, I think I can do this on 11s too. But yeah, the setup of the guitar is not necessarily the most important thing with legato anyway. How often do I practice the guitar? I play guitar every single day. I wouldn't necessarily call it practice. This is an Ice Blue Strat, Carmelo Carlo. James Naylor asked my favourite cab. I think my favourite cab is on the Fractal devices. It's the Legacy 103. Oh, thanks, Kevin, so much for that. Are you enjoying your stomp then, Kevin? I think for sure the Helix stuff helps people find this channel. Okay, so 9's tuned to E flat. That's basically like an 8, isn't it, for any of the rest of us? So yeah, Meshuggah, super thin strings by the looks of that, if that's true. Yeah, a lobster says the mules are meant to be like some sort of short scale baritone. Could be marketing speak, but it does make for a real vibe. They are definitely an interesting sounding guitar, like quite steely. Is that a word? They sound kind of metallic. I don't know whether that's because oftentimes I'm seeing people play them with a slide, but you know, like in a good way. You're like hearing a lot of string with those types of guitars, maybe. Gorav asks, is it possible to use different snapshot types per banks, like one with stop snap and the other bank with 8 snapshots? I guess with Command Center, maybe. I do miss some things from the Kemper, Kevin. I feel like some of the, what was it called, like the formant reverb is a beautiful thing where you can have like E sounding reverbs or O or A. Who was in that rig rundown? I resent doing this. Yeah, Rita Pasha has a good point there. If they're using long scale necks, which they are, they're generally like 27, 28. I don't know, does that have like more string tension than it would do, wouldn't it? So that's part of the thing that's going on as well. But oftentimes, yeah, so you're gonna have, it's gonna feel slightly heavier than it looks in some ways, right? Jackin, I think I've done a video on the power cab. Let me find it for you. This is my... This is my power cab thoughts. What are the main setting tweaks to be aware of when plugging directly into a PA versus front of a regular amp? So, that's very different. So, when you're plugging in front of an amp, do you mean like using the amp modeling in the HX Stomp in front of a real amp? Is that what you have been doing? And Jason asks, I have to play with headphones at home on my Helix LT. Are there any headphones that you recommend trying to dial it in and get the same or close to same then at a gig? If you can get your sound guy to leave your channel well alone, then you're going to be fighting things a bit less than if they are doing the things that you would do for a normal guitar tone. But I think you're going to find that things... just naturally, by the fact that you're going to be hearing things at volume with a drummer, might be quite a bit different. So maybe I would try playing along. This was something that Ross from Yamaha said in the video the other day about trying to play along with a backing track, playing along with like backing track, similar sort of stuff to what you're going to be playing, or the actual stuff if you can, in headphones. Try that kind of thing. And then familiarize yourself with the quick changes that you think you might want to make on the Helix. So you might think, okay, I definitely need more mids, and how would you do that quickly? Or I need to roll off a load of highs. How would you do that quickly on the Helix or HX Stomp? If you can figure your way through that, I think that might be of benefit. Okay, Vikram, it's been in front of the amp with just the preamp models versus PA with the full amp cab sims. It's going to be a very, very different thing, I think. Hey, Keith, how you doing? Did you see my Christmas time is here for you the other day? We are wearing a Christmas present that Liana, my wife, got for me. It's a very warm kind of fake velvet hoodie thing. But it keeps me warm. It's good fun too. So Vikram, I've got no solid advice for that. I think you're just going to have to try it, and it's going to sound very different into the PA, in my opinion, because at the moment what you're doing is completely different to that. So I would try going just direct into studio monitors at home and tweaking your sounds that way, and then try it in front of a PA. I wouldn't think that your presets that are using the preamp models are going to be particularly transferable over to the full PA kind of tone. Carlo asks, what are my thoughts on the Fender Roadworn Vintera series? So, in a shop local to me, I've seen a few of these on the wall, and the fretboard looks incredibly light, as in coloured quite light. And on some of the Vinteras, I felt the frets were a little bit sharp, a little bit pokey, and the fretboards also look incredibly dry. So that's what I've noticed on the Vinteras that I've seen in person. I never owned a Vintera Roadworn. I had one of the older Roadworns, which actually I thought are incredible value for money, or were, and then they went up in value. But I think I got the 50s black Roadworn one, which was like 500 at the time when I bought it. I did quite like that guitar. I think they were really good value for money. I'm not sure if the Vintera are quite, to me, they don't seem to be quite the same quality. How's your break been, Keith? How to normalize volume between different patches. I think one at a time, and you maybe just listen to the difference between two presets, because depending on the tone as well, the way that you perceive the volume is going to be different. And think about what you're trying to achieve when you're doing that. Personally, I tried to stay with snapshots for a gig, so I used like one preset and snapshots for all of that stuff. Are you in the US, Carlo? Around that price range, I felt like the Tokai stuff that I've tried was at least as good quality as some of the higher end Fender stuff. Is that true, Kevin? I thought the necks and bodies on those were made in Mexico, but I don't know if that's true. Patrick Carroll says, "Hey John, I'm trying to demystify this. I'm told third-party IRs are highly recommended to improve the HX's tone. But do you use them if you plug into either a combo or cab with greenbacks?" No, you don't. Generally, if you're going to be plugging into a cab, your IRs will then be turned off. The thing about you would only use those into a PA or speakers. Yes. The other thing is the experience of actually picking IRs and stuff is not necessarily much different to using stock cabs. I think Nick Hill did a cool video talking about why he's moved away from IRs and uses stock cabs now. I tend to, when I'm doing preset builds, use stock cabs. I still have that one IR that I use all the time from Ownhammer. The Fractal world is all IR based, and going through those IRs is very much, you're going through a list and you're checking out sounds and stuff, and you're making mental notes and saying, okay, I know I like this cab. So there's definitely plus and minuses to the whole thing, but I don't think inherently necessarily IRs are always better. I just think it's possibly could be for some people a quicker route. Jason asks, there's an AZS in purest blue for $279 at Guitar Center. Do I still like mine? I do. It's not the best guitar I've ever played though. Any advice on the expression pedal with a foot switch connection in the HX Stomp? What sort of thing more specifically, Steve? I'm using an expression pedal right now, but ask a question I can try and answer. I also wonder if, this was a thing that BB said, that maybe big IR is responsible for seeding kind of myths that all stock cabs are rubbish or whatever. Because I've heard people talk about the quad Cortex cabs and said, what IR should I pair with it? Where, those IRs are shot by Nolly, who's responsible for a good chunk of modern metal tones and rock stuff. People might be buying IRs even for Fractal, and they stock their Fractal stuff with M Audio stuff and bits and pieces like that. Oh, Steve, I asked earlier, which cords do you use to connect two separate pedals to the Stomp? Would it be like a Y cable stereo to mono? So Y to 2 mono, I think is what you'd want. I think. Oh, thanks, Kyle Cycling. So Kyle says, your Podgo preset videos have given me better results than anyone. Would love it if you posted more. Specifically, what are you interested in, Carl? And I can try and do another kind of video. Generally, the Pod Go stuff, I can recreate something like what I'm doing with the Helix and HX Stomp most of the time. So if you've got ideas, then that'd be cool to... I'll try and do them. Hey Nicola, I'm using the Freeze 3.0 Ice Z, which will be in the expression folder. Basically, I can freeze a note. Which is like my own kind of freeze way of doing things. I'm using in it a Dr. Z or Dr. Z Route 66 model. I don't know what cab I'm using with that one. Do like the way it sounds though. Oh, the Cali extension with the 57. Oh, sorry, I didn't answer about the Iridium. So, I have had a few. I don't have one right now. The thing is, I'm not using a pedal board so much at the moment, so it doesn't make loads of sense for me. Because I like the idea of having an all-in-one kind of modeler that can do all of my stuff and not having to kind of foot switch between bits and pieces. So that's the reason for me at the moment. I've kind of been a bit anti-pedal board in my own personal life, just because I think it's it can be like an endless kind of road, you know, the search for different pedal board things and being on that pedal train, if you like. So for me at the moment, I'm really loving the value of modelers. Most of the time that'll be what I use at a gig, or if I'm using an amp, I like the idea of a channel switching amp, so I can just take an amp with a foot switch like the Mesa Boogie Nomad, and if it's a simple enough gig, I don't need delay and reverb and bits and pieces, then I can just take that amp, or I can take the Mesa Boogie Mark 525 with the HX effects in the loop, and that can channel switch and do the delay and reverb. So it's, at the moment, I'm not taking out a pedal board, so for me the Iridium doesn't make loads of sense for me. Gilad Hexelman, I would suggest Vikram is quite a experimental, quite an experimental kind of chap who's does cool stuff with looper pedals, does cool stuff with octave pedals, and does cool things with a freeze pedal. So Gilad Hexelman, I think, is one. Jonathan Kreisberg even does some cool stuff with delay and pogs and bits and pieces. Those jazz guys do loads of cool stuff. Those guys stick out to me as being interesting, as well as being, of course, incredibly interesting actual players. Hey here says, I have Boss GT001, the GP10, the ME70. I keep looking at the HX Stomp. Why would I tell you to go to one is the sound quality and options that much better? I don't know if it is or not. I just know that it's what I use most days. And I know that people can have my tones for it. So, yeah, I don't know. It's, for me, I think presents incredibly good value for money, especially in Europe. So it's like 400 quid, I think, and can do crazy kind of amount of stuff compared to something like a Strymon Timeline might be kind of in that same ballpark money wise, and what you get for your money out of the HX Stomp I think is kind of unparalleled. So that's personally why I really like it and why I'm happy to use them all the time. Alan Beadle asks, have I ever played a bum note? Yes, I have. It went like this. Wait. Rito Pasha says he's compared the Helix native to the GT100 and they prefer the amp modelling on the Helix. I will say I did a comparison with the Iridium and the Boss IR200, and once you use the same IR for both, I found actually the Boss IR200 did keep up really well with the Iridium. So I think there's something going on with Boss's own cab modelling which is not necessarily to my preference. And maybe if you try IRs with like a GT001 or GT100, you might get some cool results out of it. It's just the interface on the Boss stuff which I kind of struggle with. It seems a little bit alien to me. This has all just been major scale stuff, play pray. Hey Daniel, it's been good. How's yours been? C-6 over D. Possibly. Can I freeze it though? That's the real question. I've never tried a Variax, no. There's something about the aesthetic of them which doesn't make me really want to try one out too much. That's quite like a silly thing to say in some ways, but I'm sure they're very powerful, but I've never tried one. Good to chat, Keith. I'll catch you soon. Rob asks, I just got the Stomp XL going to be direct at church setting. Rock to modern worship stuff relies on great reverb and delays. How would you recommend I learned to set best from Stomp? So, right, I would recommend for you the glitz reverb in the HX Stomp is not the... It uses less DSP than some of the others. It's quite tweakable. I like the sound of the glitz reverb. So I recommend trying that one out. I'd set the decay a little bit longer than the default, but not much, and set the mix to around 18%, around there. Then delay wise, I really like the dual delay, but there's also the transistor tape, which is worth checking out. Those would be the three things that I would start with, I think. Yeah, so start with the glitz reverb, and I think start with the transistor tape delay, and maybe also the dual. Yeah, that sort of thing is where I'd start. And don't be afraid to change from the default settings. So on the transistor tape, one thing I would always do is go and take the headroom up to plus 12 dB so that you don't clip that block. I would do that. And the other thing I might do is set the spread to 100% so you've got like a nice stereo kind of delay thing going on. Those kind of things. John asks, I have the Headrush MX5. Do I think the Stomp is an upgrade over it? Not necessarily. The MX5 will have more kind of processing power under the hood, so you'll be able to run more blocks and more dual amps and that sort of thing. The thing that I didn't love so much about the Headrush stuff was the kind of lack of snapshots. I felt like I missed that versus the Helix. Aside from that, it's pretty cool. Kevin says, I think I missed it earlier, but the road-worn necks and bodies were made at custom shop and then were shipped to Mexico. Is that true? That's cool. If that is the case, then those would probably be worth checking out. Miguel says it would be a great idea to do a live stream building a preset from scratch, just using best amps, cabs and effects from the... I tried to do those on like the actual videos where if I'm investigating like the deluxe reverb, you see me do those builds from scratch. So hopefully that's kind of useful. There's lots of that stuff on the channel already. I don't know that this live stream might be a bit tricky to, because I can't really show you without a dual camera set up the screen on the Stomp. Right, they use COSM instead of AIRD. Yeah, the IR200 uses the GT1000 tech. I think that's definitely true, or the GT1000 core. I think they're probably using the same kind of chipsets for all of these bits and pieces, probably. Thin preset into the folder should be. If not, I will do it. I don't know, maybe some should be in there. Possibly not yet. You might be the first person to request it. In which case, remind me. I need to do that. No, it's not in there yet. Animal Eka asks, can I use the HX Stomp live stage without an amp? Depends on the monitoring situation really, but yeah, in theory you can. And I have done that in the past, you know, where I don't have space in the car for like a monitor or anything. I don't necessarily think that's the optimal way to get good feel on stage though. But it's often the way that things are going these days. Hey Jackin, no, I need to send you the email. You won't have the main folder just yet. You're probably looking at the freeze presets right now. Hey Lee, so am I using the neural quad cortex much since I got one? Not seen it on the channel. No, I got rid of it because things weren't interesting enough for me to keep hold of it, and the pace of updates and the interest on the channel for it wasn't really there. You know, I tried to do a few kind of videos talking about bits and pieces to do with it, like updating firmware and those bits and pieces, and there wasn't much interest. And not only that, but they seem to pay a lot of kind of YouTubers to do other stuff anyway, so I've kind of lost a bit of interest in what they got going on, to be honest. Have you still got one, Lee? Or are you thinking of grabbing one? Hey Tim, I'm just hanging out and having a little bit of a chat. It should be in the 3.1 folder then, Jack, and if you've got my email. They're fairly low, yes. Yeah, 3.1 will be the main folder. That's where the new stuff goes. Yeah, Lee, I think it's one of those things where the good thing about Neural is they do pay a fair bunch of musicians quite well to do the content and stuff, whereas some other companies don't. It's no bother, Jack, and it helps the stream anyway if you're chatting, so it's not negative at all. But I think also then you can maybe get a bit of a skewed view of people's real opinion on the thing. I don't know whether there's loads of people out there using a quad cortex that have bought one, but there are for sure loads of people that are happy with the quad cortex. But as someone that's had plenty of other modelers, there's not anything that stands out to me about it, basically. In fact, you know, for all of the things that they said that it was going to do, you know, there are plenty of other things that make all of those sounds and more. Do I play acoustic through my Helix stuff much? Not really. I did a video trying to kind of improve piezo tone the other day. That was playing with acoustic, but generally I'm an electric player. But, you know, gigging and stuff, I have to play an acoustic if I'm doing duo stuff. And I've done that through a Helix a few times. It's probably a bit of a blind spot. I could probably do more with that on the channel. If I could, yeah, I guess I could do that. Do I prefer the amp sounds of the Line 6 to the Kemper? Keith asks. So this is, oh, cheers, Jackin. Customer service. Yeah, the thing about that is that the Kemper, as such, doesn't really have amp sounds, does it? You're kind of playing someone else's captured amp sounds. So the Kemper, I think there are loads and loads and loads and loads of great tones from it. And, you know, when it comes to, you know, if you're in the studio and you've found a tone that you really like and you think, right, I'd like to have something super close to that So I've done this myself with the Fender Champ, and I've done this myself with the California Tweed. And then you listen back and you play through the thing. It's very convincing, I think. But building the thing from scratch is not so possible in the Kemper. Now, yes, it is possible that you can go and you can change essentially speakers around. And I do love the delays and reverbs in the Kemper. You know, those kind of things I kind of dig. Clive Wills asked, would I be able to help out with some ideas for getting around the blues without just sitting in the safe box, but implying chords a bit more and making the changes more interesting? I would check out a guy called Jack Rutch Guitar. I don't know how you actually say his name, but he's like a really cool blues player and does some YouTube videos and stuff. I'm not exactly accomplished at any kind of playing, but blues is definitely not the kind of playing that I'm good at. So I would check out Jack's playing, and he has some really kind of specific thoughts on that sort of stuff, I think, and really good advice on that. I can try and give some in some ways, but probably not right now. Yeah, Timothy, that is the tricky thing about Patreon. What I would suggest maybe doing is asking me, if you just shoot me an email and say, how can I find something on X topic, and I can try and find it. But I think you can search tags maybe. So I tag things as backing tracks, and I tag things as lessons, and I tag things like Legato, so you could try search through those sorts of things. Kevin says, Kemper always felt like I plugged into someone else's amp and they told me I couldn't change the settings. If you EQ too much, the profile falls apart. There are some things, so if you go into the rig settings and you can change things like clarity and definition, I think certainly the Kemper is more tweakable than I think a lot of people believe, or a lot of people experiment with, but there's like not the same feeling of starting from scratch and going, okay, right, I want to dial in a sound. It's more like, okay, well, I've got these options of deluxe reverbs, I've got these options of AC30s, what's already in there, or you go and search online and go through some videos and say, okay, who's got a good Morgan AC20 pack? And that for me, I never really liked the idea of going around and buying loads of different packs. I feel like it's good for the Kemper profile people that profile stuff, and a great way to make some money, but as a user I kind of prefer the Helix kind of ground up way personally. I think anyway. Then I guess the other cool thing about the HX Stomp and stuff like that is that, and you could do this with a Kemper to some extent as well, with the lock function, but you could take someone else's preset and you can say, right, I want to chuck in a Timmy in front of this, or I want to change out the amp and cab. I feel like the Helix is a bit more inviting you to do that than the Kemper is. The Kemper interface feels, I don't know that it's definitely is, but it feels a little bit more fixed in some ways, and you don't have parallel paths and stuff. So from that point of view, you know, if you grabbed profiles, or sorry, if you grabbed presets from Custom Tone, I feel like it's a bit more inviting to get in there and sort of dig around the preset and change bits and pieces and make it your own than perhaps people tend to do with the Kemper stuff. Have I ever tried real amps with a UA aux or a Captor X? I have tried with both. Let me... here's Dusty Ox, and then Captor X I've done stuff with as well. At the moment I use a Fractal X load box. And no doubt the Kemper has really lasted incredibly well, and I think it still looks like it's going to have legs, and I think probably it's going to be a classic piece of gear for a lot of people. Yeah, I guess with COVID, £2,000 paperweight. That's the thing I guess I like about the Line 6 stuff as well. Like the HX Stomp particularly, I think is great value. You know, £400 is what they cost over here, and you can get a lot out of them for that kind of money. But now even like a Kemper in the UK, you can pick them up for sort of 800 quid and stuff. So I think that's also kind of cool. Did I notice a difference compared to HX Stomp, for example? I don't know. It's a bit of a different thing plugging an amp into a load box. I've done comparisons like the Vox kind of bits and pieces. I've not heard Ben Lacey. What am I looking for? Like the Lone Star, the comparisons that I've done of the Lone Star with the Helix and with the Axe effects, those are done with a load box. And I think the differences are actually way smaller than I expected. So Alok asks about what I would use for the HX Stomp. Oh, cheers, Wesley. The answer for me is I tried to use the modelling as an all-in-one solution, really. So the idea for me when I'm gigging is to try and get away from super complicated pedal boards or anything like that. And that's what I like about modelling, is that I can switch loads of things with one foot switch. And so at the moment I gig a Helix. And I don't gig a HX Stomp at the moment. I think I've got used to having a few more buttons. But yeah, an HX Stomp as part of a board is not something that I've done loads of, but I've messed around with the idea of it on the channel with like a timeline and a Big Sky after the HX Stomp. But I was running those just in series. I don't think I would generally put stuff in the loop of the HX Stomp personally. Yeah. Yeah. Month of rent switching from Kemper to the Stomp. I guess when times are tough, the Kemper's first to go. Have I tried to gig with the Podgo? I did, but it was a terrible gig. So I've not really done it properly. I need to try that again. The sounds, yeah, the feel for the player, Lee Abraham, I suggest, is more to do with how we're reinforcing the sounds live, because in the studio and like if you put it through the same cab and stuff, things are basically indiscernible, I think, for a lot of things. But I think what happens when we take a modeler out live is that we're generally going to be playing it through either an FRFR or a power cab or something, and a power cab definitely does have a different sound and feel to a real cab, and I think that is the missing piece. Oh, Christopher, the alt lead patch, I'm using an Own Hammer one, but you can just use the normal Own Hammer one that's in my thing, in my folder, because it's got such a big high cut anyway that it doesn't matter. The only reason that IR was in there was because I was trying to match it with an Axe Effects. Yeah, I think you can definitely gig the Podgo. The thing that I found a little bit tricky with it was going between the two modes. That was new for me. But because on the Helix I use Stomp and Snaps in the same kind of view, the Podgo, you can switch between stomp and snap mode, if that makes sense. But you could definitely gig with a Podgo. I just need to experiment with it a bit more. Would I recommend a power cap over an FRFR? It depends on the FRFR. No two of them are alike, really. Have I tried Helix native and moving patches between your stomp? As in going from Helix native to stomp. Generally, I build on the unit itself just because I like to learn how the unit works and get even more used to that, especially if I'm going to gig the thing. That's generally my workflow. But I have built some stuff in Helix native and then put it over onto the HX Stomp. Yeah, it is pretty powerful. I think it's kind of cool. And the idea of having a plugin form of the Helix is still unique to Line 6, right? And I think that is a super powerful thing that doesn't really get talked about enough. You know, Neural haven't done that, Fractal haven't done that. Some of these aspects are pretty unique to Line 6. I think that's a really cool thing, being able to run the same kind of presets in plugin format. And then, you know, there are definite uses for reamping and all that sort of stuff. Not something that I've explored loads, but it is certainly pretty powerful. I need to go and get a drink. The Headrush 108 is not necessarily a dud, but it's also not necessarily the tip of the spear for FRFR stuff. I think you can spend as much money as you want on this stuff. The main thing is, though, that most of the cheaper FRFR stuff is kind of like a PA speaker, and the PA speaker has a tweeter, and I think a tweeter is the kind of worst friend or worst enemy of modeling tones. I think once you put stuff through a tweeter, it starts to sound pretty funky. But yeah, if you can cut out that tweeter somehow, that's kind of useful. Corndog asks, have I tried playing the Helix through USB? Sometimes, yes, but it's not the main thing I do. Right, I need to go and get a drink. Hope things are good in Brazil. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I hope this was something rather than nothing, and I hope one or two of your questions were answered. I'll catch you in another video soon, and yeah, cheers, stay safe, and speak to you in another video tomorrow, I guess. Let me know if you've got ideas for videos. If you just leave a comment somewhere on the channel. Steve suggests raising your 108 off the ground makes a hell of a difference. Yeah. Benjamin suggests checking your global EQ out if you're using an FRFR. I think that's great advice. I would try and get away from Logic Pro Match EQ. I think people are still using things like Fab Filter. I use that a little bit, and yeah, I think that's essentially what the Kemper and the neural, what is it, neural quad cortex capture thing and the Kemper profiling. Those are doing an idea of tone matching, and there are, I believe, free like open source versions of captures which can be done. But yeah, it's kind of, it doesn't feel the same when you do it on a computer in a way. It's a bit of a drier experience. Do you get what I mean? Like it's a bit more scientific, and it doesn't feel as magical as doing it on a device where you say profile and then play the profile through the same cab. It's a bit of a different thing. But yeah, I think that is basically what the Kemper and the neural stuff are doing anyway, and it is essentially kind of like a match EQ type thing. Right, I'll catch you in another video soon, and thank you all so much. Thank you for people who donated, like Kevin, and where did you go? Stephen, wasn't it? And Jackin as well. I'll send out some emails now, and I'll catch you in another video. I've already said that. Cheers.